Hello, viewers of Spell. This will be What If Asta Was in Fairytail compilation video, and this will actually include all the current parts that are out. Now, don't forget if you like this content to please like, share, and subscribe. I will be trying a slightly different style after this to try to push out more content. But, other than that, let's get on to this video, and I hope you enjoy. So we start with our gang of Asta, Natsu, Gray, Lucy, and Happy in the village recuperating from the retreat. Natsu and Asta would be arguing on what their next action would be, with Natsu wanting to go there and punch them, but Asta disagreeing, thinking that they should regroup or try to attack the temple directly, perhaps destroying it, which Natsu seemed to like, but before he could respond, Gray would wake up. They would ask him who Leon was, and he would explain that his old master was the one that sealed Deliora, and Leon was her other student. None of this would be changed from canon. Gray would then say that Leon's his. He's the one that needs to stop him, with Natsu disagreeing, but Asta just asking him if he thinks he can actually win. Gray nods, saying that he's cool-headed now, and that he should be able to defeat Leon. As they come up with a plan, Natsu will try to disrupt the moon drip ritual as much as possible, and Gray would confront Leon, and Asta would confront any of the remaining lackeys. Lucy would just ask what she and Happy should do, but Asta would tell her that they need to protect the village in case the cultists decide to attack it. Lucy agrees. As they set off from the village, they would go to the Temple of the Moon, and when they got to the third floor, Asta and Gray would confront Leon, Natsu not being with them at this time. Leon would ask if they really think the two of them can defeat him, the Cold Emperor, with Gray just telling him that Asta's not even going to be fighting him. He will defeat Leon by himself. Leon would chuckle at this before preparing to fight, telling Gray how pathetic it is he still uses two hands to cast his spells. But before the fight could get going, a crystal ball would head right for Gray's head, but quickly be blocked by Asta, saying that just because he's not going to interfere in Gray's fight doesn't mean he's going to let anyone else interfere with it, as a man with a green mask walks out. As this fight begins, Leon and Gray would start going at it. Maker Magic versus Maker Magic. Shield versus Snake. Cage versus Tiger. So on and so forth. And Asta would begin blocking the magic of the masked man, as he kept shooting crystal balls at him, while Asta kept having to break them. But they would keep reforming. But 1 minute of the fight starting, the temple would start shaking and slanting, as everyone would have to stop their fights for a second to regain balance. Asta thinking that Natsu went a little overboard. But if they slant the entire temple, it should at least make it harder for them to perform the ritual, as the masked man grimaced and set his hand on the floor, as the floor quickly decayed under them. Asta and the masked man fell. The masked man just told the Cold Emperor that he was going to leave the other one to him, as Leon and Gray's duel would go the same as canon. So, back over to Natsu at the first floor, he was looking over his work of destroyed pillars with pride, until a number of rocks nearly fell on his head. Asta and the masked man fell from the ceiling. Asta both catching themselves, landed. Natsu would just ask he was trying to kill him with those rocks, as Asta just said no, this guy's weird magic. As the masked man would just explain that he wields a forgotten type of magic, so powerful it was forgotten from the pages of history. Wheel of Time. With Natsu not recognizing the name, and Asta having a look of concern. He had read about some types of ancient magic and remember hearing something about certain types of time magic, and that they're incredibly dangerous. But they typically weren't very effective against living things. As the masked man simply put a hand on the floor, recovered the ceiling from its hole, and repaired the temple. All in a matter of seconds. Natsu looked shocked at the man's ability to just right everything they had done. But he would just tell the masked man, "Fine, I'll just have to destroy it again." As the masked man, still with his hand on the floor, would decay the floor again. Before Asta would try jumping forward to stop him, but it was too late. All three of them were plummeting into the caves, holding Deliora. As they all landed precariously, as a fight would begin. Going back to the village, Lucy had Virgo dig a large pit to stop anyone from attacking the villages through their gate. As she stood outside the gate, Happy asked her if she thinks this pit trap will actually work, with Lucy just saying, "Yeah, it is, no kidding." As about 15 cultists came out of the woods. They had torches and what seemed to be jars of oil, preparing to burn down the village. As they would start their fight, she would summon Virgo and, well, their cultists without much magic. Almost all the strong individuals in this group were defeated. Last part when Asta and the gang fought Leon at his camp. So they would go pretty quickly. She even managed to run back into the town and trick a bunch of them into falling into the pit, where a bunch of the villagers grabbed rocks and sticks and started just beating up the cultists. And Happy would also be dropping rocks on their head by flying them incredibly high up. The cultists surrendered within about 2 minutes of this, so none of them died of, well, rock bludgeoning. Back down to the caves, where Asta, Natsu, and the masked man were fighting, as fiery fists were going off, and a black sword was cutting through the crystal balls, as masked man had created over a dozen crystal balls to all attack them at once, as they kept trying to dodge, but they kept getting hit, as Natsu used the fire on his feet and shot forward, taking his fist and bringing it back and preparing to hit the masked man. The masked man would jump away and use his magic to force part of the roof to fall in, forcing Natsu to jump back. Natsu would just tell Asta that it's time to pull out that little trick he's been working on, as Asta nodded, as he brought up his Demon Devourer sword. As Natsu, Lucy, Happy, and Gray's marks would light up. As Asta said, "I hope you don't mind if I take some of your magic." As the magic all was forced into the sword, as he released it, the masked man would bring all of his crystal balls in for defense and leaped away. The crystal balls were destroyed, along with the stone the man was standing on, but he jumped back, chuckling, saying, "You missed, you fool," as Natsu jumped in and gave him a punch, as he sent him into the wall. Gray would come through a side passage a minute later, panting after his battle, as Leon would actually come out, barely able to stand a minute later. Gray had beat the crap out of him, but he was still somehow moving, as a purple light would come from the ceiling. Leon, behind them, leaning against the wall, would chuckle, saying, it only takes a couple people to perform the moon drip spell, and that this is a potent form of it. Deliora will be freed in a minute. As the ice cracked, Gray prepared to use Ice Shell against Deliora, before Asta and Natsu stepped in front of him, telling him that at least let them try to fight him before he pulled a suicidal move like that, as both prepared to fight Deliora. The ice would crack and Deliora would let out a blood-curdling roar that even Urza could feel on a boat miles away. As Natsu prepared to fight it, as Asta prepared as well, Deliora would bring down a magically imbued fist, as Asta would bring up his sword and defend. But as soon as he hit the sword, Asta expected Deliora's magic to be sent back at him, but he wasn't expecting Deliora to begin cracking and breaking apart, as they were able to put together the truth. Or their master had been slowly weakening Deliora. What they saw was just simply a few minutes of life left in him. If they had left him in there for a year, the ice would have probably broken apart on its own since Deliora was dead. Leon yelled that he would never have another chance to surpass war, with Gray kicking him in the gut. You have to admit, Leon was a jerk here. And as the group left, Leon would begin rethinking his life. Back at the village, they had successfully tied up the cultists and proceeded to put them outside the village with a sign that said, "I think these are yours." As when the guys got back, the village would still be asking them why the curse hasn't been lifted. As Asta would explain that he believes that the town they're actually in their natural form. The moon drip caused the unnatural side effect of memory loss, or at least that's what he thinks. As the fisherman who took them there would fly down and just say that Asta actually had some really good recognition, as they would have a tearful reunion. As Lucy would just ask Asta, "Why is the moon purple then?" Asta would just respond that he can only assume that's a side effect of the moon drip, and that it was having a negative side effect on them. And then the villagers would throw a party in the team's honor. Leon's lackeys would come by and apologize, like in canon, as they would be offered to stay, but they didn't feel it was right. But only 30 minutes later, the entire gang would just hear Urza yell, "Natsu," in a deep demonic voice. And that's where everyone started to run. We begin the Phantom Lord. Our main gang would be coming back from a job and find everyone talking about something. The gang would first just think someone blew something up again, but when they got to the guild hall, they would discover that it was destroyed with a lot of metal rods. Horrified by this, they would find the guild master and everyone else in the basement. They would ask the guild master what happened, and the guild master would respond, "Hip. Yeah, I think it was Phantom Lord. But no one was in the building. I don't want any of you retaliating." "But Gramps!" "No buts about it. It's not worth bringing the wrath of the council down on us. And besides, hurt by it." As the guildmaster would be very clearly drunk. Asta would be clutching his fist while Gray and Asta would be looking for someone to fight. Lucy would be shocked by the fact that Phantom Lord did this, apparently. But Mary Jane would explain how things worked, and that the council could disband the guild if they went to war with Phantom Lord, along with the fact that Phantom Lord weren't easy. You had their guild master, a member of the 10 Wizard Saints, their equivalent to the S-Class Wizards, the Element 4, and Gajiel, the Iron Dragon Slayer, and his cronies. Lucy would be surprised that there's more than one Dragon Slayer around. Natsu would just grunt in response, and Lucy would leave. When Lucy would be surprised to see Natsu, Gray, Urza, and Happy all in her apartment. She would ask them what they were doing, and they would explain that Master Makarov told everyone that they should team up with each other overnight just to make sure no one tried attacking them, and that they all decided to come to Lucy's place. And then Asta would open up the door. Lucy would start to think that her apartment was way too small for all of them, but Asta had just brought over some sleeping bags. Lucy would be happy since she was thinking that some of them would have to sleep on a couch or even the floor, as Asta also just mentioned that he's not going to be staying the night. He's going to team up with Elfman and Mary Jane, since Mary Jane can't use her magic after the incident. Everyone except Lucy would nod or look sad, and Lucy would have no idea what they meant by that, but judging from several pained expressions, she didn't ask. And then Asta would depart. He would be walking Mary Jane and Elfman to their place when a figure would walk out in front of them. A blonde-haired, lanky-looking boy that seemed rather short, and a man with a mohawk, sunglasses, with a punk aesthetic would walk in behind them. Elfman would use Beast Soul to give himself a arm of a rock monster, and Asta would summon his sword. Asta would just say, "So, you guys don't exactly look like you're random citizens," as the blonde one would sneer. "We're gonna crush some fairies. But this fight might at least be fun," as lightning boots and gauntlets would appear on his arms, as the man behind them would make a flame bat. Elfman would say, "You're fighting two real men. Do you really think you two are gonna be able to win?" As the two would introduce themselves. "I'm Luck, the Cherry Berserker, and I'm Magna of the Flame Bat, and we're gonna defeat you." As both sides would rush forward, Mary Jane would try to stay out of the way while worrying about Elfman. The Flame Bat and Asta's sword would actually collide, with Asta's sword cutting right through it. Magna would be shocked before he got kicked in the gut, as Asta just smiled. "I guess we didn't introduce ourselves. I'm Asta, the Black Sword, and my friend over there's Beastarm Elfman." As Elfman would attack Luck. Luck would manage to dodge several blows, but his attacks would be blocked by the stone arm. The alley would be full of lightning flame, while rocks and even a sword would fly. Asta would ask Mary Jane to fill up his Demon Destroyer sword as she charged it with magic. He then released it in a massive wave. It would destroy a good chunk of the street and finally force them back. Asta would be panting along with Elfman. Those two were strong, they thought, as they would have a sense of victory as they would continue walking. Unfortunately, at the same time, Levy and Team Shadowgear would be walking as a figure followed them in the shadows. The next morning, they would find Team Shadowgear pinned to a tree in the park with the Phantom Lord Guild crest painted on them. Makarov would break his staff in anger as veins bulged on his head. He would simply say that they dared attack my children. As he turned around to the others, "This means war. Phantom Lord has declared war on Fairytail, and they will find that we simply gave them grace for attacking our guild hall. But they have gone too far. Today we go to war with Phantom Lord." So we start off this what if in the Phantom Lord guild hall, with the door being busted in, with Asta in the front saying, "Fairytail's come a-callin'." As Natsu and Gray yelled at him, "I wanted to say that line," as everyone rushed into the Phantom Lord guild hall. A massive brawl began breaking out between Phantom Lord and Fairytail. Some swords, magic, and even a few chairs were flying all over the place. Phantom Lord seemed to be... Asta would be a little bit surprised that Phantom Lord seemed so surprised. After all, they're the one that picked this fight. As he ducked another fireball, and flat of his blade to hit someone over the head, knocking him out. Fire, ice, wood, swords would be being shot off by Fairytail, with Phantom Lord members being hit or trying to defend, to little success. Makarov would tell everyone that he was going to go up and find Josei, as he enlarged his fist and swatted some Phantom Lord Guild members away. As Urza just yelled that she understood, and that they will hold them off here. And once Makarov was out of sight, an iron club would come down from the rafters, hitting a couple Fairytail members, along with multiple Phantom Lord members. As Gray made a comment that he hit his own guys with that attack. What's his problem? As Gajo would come out of the rafters, along with his two main lackeys, Luck and Magna. Magna would get a flaming bat going and hit with a fairly large fireball that would break out into a bunch of littles as it sailed towards Fairytail. Luck would have his lightning boots and start hitting people, chuckling that, haha, this will be fun, as the battle intensified. As Luck would go to try to kick one of the Fairytail members, as Elfman would catch his foot, and with the arm of some sort of gorilla beast, he would fling Luck across the room. You'll have to go through me to hurt my friends. As Gajo said, you should watch where you're going, beast arm. He would yell, Iron Dragon Club. But before it made contact with anyone, a black sword would block it. With Asta saying, I guess it was you, Gajiel. As Gajiel said, who are you? Asta would respond with, I'm the Black Sword, Asta, guy with anti-magic. Remember a few years ago, we actually met on a job. As Gajiel remembered, I tried eating your sword. You nearly broke my tooth. Yeah, we never finished that fight. As Asta would look at him. Yes, and back then I wouldn't have wanted to hurt you too bad. But now, after what you did to Levi, I'm gonna beat you to a pulp. As both lunged at each other, Gajo would go in for an Iron Dragon talent before Asta would dodge. Gajo would make an Iron Dragon sword, and that sword and Asta's sword would clash. The Iron Dragon sword would actually hold up against the Demon Dweller, as multiple blows were being dealt. Before Natsu would jump in, using Asta as a balancing board, he would deliver a flaming kick to Gajiel. As Asta said, what's the big idea? What's the big idea using me as a balancing board? As Natsu would just responded, this is a Dragon Slayer. I'm gonna fight him. Asta would just sigh and say, don't lose. And stay on your toes. Something's not right. As he sliced the fireball in half. But a second later, Makarov would fall from the roof higher layers. It was obvious something had happened to him. He looked green and unwell. Urza called out for Master Makarov. The Fairytail members looked and saw Makarov on the ground. They weren't sure what happened. The Fairy Guild members started to panic, and Phantom Lord began regrouping. The tide of the battle quickly started to turn in Phantom Lord's favor as their side regrouped. As Urza called for a retreat, several Phantom Lord members would try using a combination spell to shoot at the Fairytail Guild members, before Asta used the flat of his blade and shot it back at them, and just yelled for everyone to move. Gajo would laugh at them, the fleeing Fairytail Guild members, as Natsu sneered at him for that. But Asta would tell Natsu that not even he can take on the entire guild alone. We need to get out of here now, as Fairytail retreated. Now flashing back to Lucy, she would be walking through the street. I guess they needed someone to watch over Levi and the rest of Team Shadow Gear, but why did it have to be me? I'm the newest member. Maybe that's why. As a woman dressed in blue would walk up behind her, and a man that appeared to come out of the earth got up in front of her. The man spoke in a French accent, telling her that they've been looking all over for Mademoiselle Lucy Hotfilia. Lucy would be shocked at hearing that name, and go for her keys, but she would be surrounded by a water bubble. She wouldn't be able to get her keys and she would pass out. She'd wake up at the Phantom Lord Guild building, tied to a chair. This would go pretty much exactly in canon, including her kicking Josei in the crotch and bolting out the window with Natsu coming to save her. She would go back to and find out how bad of a state everyone is. Multiple members were injured, with them trying to get more powerful members back at the guild hall. Loxus would make crude comments, which also included Lucy, as Kana yelled at him. Asta would walk up and yell at Loxus for him speaking such a tone about the fellow guild members. Loxus's facial impression would change as he just told Asta that even if he could help, he's too far away to get there. He's at least a week out. As Asta deactivated the Lacrima. As Asta deactivated the Lacrima, shaking his head. Sometimes I seriously wonder what happened to him. As he asked, any sign of Mystican or Yami? Kana, who had been using her cards to try to find them, would say, bad news, couldn't find Mystican. Good news, I found Yami. Problem is, like Moxus, when he's currently out of town, and I don't have a detection lacrima for him. We try sending a message to him, a more old-fashioned method, but it'll take at least a day for it to get to him, and with how far his job was out, I'm not sure if he'll be able to get back that soon. Urza would just sigh as she walked up. Then I guess it's up to us. As Asta just nodded, as Lucy walked up to him, as she would apologize for causing this problem. Everyone would look at her and she would explain that she was actually a runaway. Her actual name was Lucy Arphelia, and apparently part of the reason why Phantom Lord's after him is they were hired by her father to bring her back, but apparently Phantom Lord also now wants to hold her for ransom, as she just openly apologized to everyone, as they just told her that it was no problem. Fairytail will stand by her, and they won't let creeps like Phantom Lord kidnap her. As the basement of the Guildhall started to rumble, as they went outside to see a giant robot walking towards them, Lucy would ask, what was that? As Asta would respond, I think that's the Phantom Lord's secret weapon. The Fairytale members would come stumbling out of the Guildhall, as they see the Phantom Lord Guildhall walking towards them on giant spider legs, with several guild members in shock at the fact that the thing walks. As Mary Jane comes out and confirms that it's Phantom Lord's secret weapon that they've used in the past, but not in the last 50 years. She had questioned if they even still had it. As they got closer, the Phantom Lord Guildmaster would appear in hologram form and make a demand of Fairytail to hand over Lucy Arphelia. Without prompting, the guild would refuse this, given the fact that they knew he was just going to use her for ransom. And at that, Josei would just say that you've chosen your path. As a large cannon came out of the guild hall and prepared to fire, everyone was in shock. As multiple people said, he's going to use a Jupiter cannon? How are we going to stop that? As Asta started questioning what to do along with everyone else, Urza would come running out, put on her adamantine armor. She began the path of the blast and managed to block it, but her armor would break and she would pass out due to the strain. As Asta noticed that Mary Jane got Lucy to come with her, assuming that it would probably be a good idea if they had Lucy out of sight. After all, if she was the target, in theory, that should be a good idea to get her out of viewing range. As Happy and Natsu would shoot off towards the Phantom Lord Guildhall to stop this cannon, as everyone else prepared for a fight. As Asta drew a sword and started fighting off wraiths that started pouring out of Phantom Lord's Guildhall. As a minute later, an explosion would be seen as the cannon powered down, as the giant crab Guildhall, or I guess clearly it was closer to spider, would start to transform into a giant robot Guildhall. Gray, Elfman, and Asta would all rush in, knowing that no matter what was going on, this was going to be bad. As Asta jumped on his sword, traveling slower than Happy, and Gray froze the water to get to the main base. They'd meet up with Asta, as they would see they had defeated one of their Elemental 4. As the giant guild robot would finish its transformation, it would begin writing something. Asta would look at it and start to figure out that he was pretty sure it was one of those it was a forbidden spell that would destroy the entire city. Everyone else gawked at him at the fact that Phantom Lord was gonna basically commit mass murder for this. Man, those guys had anger issues. Asta would look up and tell the rest of them that most likely the magic circles either being powered by something within the fortress or people. Gray would then suggest it might be the Elemental Four, which Asta agrees to, as Asta directs all of them that they should find and defeat the Element 4, or find whatever's powering this. Probably both, as this bit would actually go very similar to canon. Gray would fight Juvia, Asta would go off deeper into the fortress, Lucy would be kidnapped again by Gajiel, and Mirjane would get captured by the giant robot. Elfman would have, I can't even remember the guy's name, the Earth Elemental 4 member try to mess with his head, with breaking free of the illusion and going full beast form, roaring in rage, and wiping the floor with the Elemental 4 member, and freeing Mirjane. Meanwhile, Asta, who had been clearing out grunts, thanks to the fact that Phantom Lord was just throwing them at him, heard the roar and hoped Elfman hadn't gone out of control. He also wondered what made Elfman take that form, shaking his head as he whacked another Phantom Lord grunt in the head as he ran up some stairs. He would run into Natsu battling the Elemental 4 member of Wind. As he tried sucking out Natsu's magic, Asta would kick the Elemental 4 member in the head, pushing him back, with him telling Natsu to go. He'll handle this. Natsu would just look at him and say, "Hey, this was my fight. And besides, you have to be careful. This guy can suck out remembering he's talking to Asta, who has no magic." Oh. Well, in that case, I guess you'll have to fight him. As Asta just said, "Yep, I'm gonna take revenge for Gramps. You go find Gajiel and beat him. I'll handle this guy." As the Elemental 4 member of Wind just scoffed. "Do you really think you can beat me, boy?" As he blasted Wind towards him. Asta would cut in half and dodge the blow, as he burst forward in a blitz of speed, slicing at the man. The man would go back, as his blindfold had actually fallen off, thanks to the attack. The man would laugh, saying that he had actually used that blindfold to conceal his magic power, as the man started radiating magical energy. Asta, who didn't have any, said, "I can tell your ki's going off the charts, but I can't sense your magic." As the man said, "I don't know what that key is. But you seriously can't even sense magic." As Asta said, "Yeah. Now, I'm guessing you were the one who sucked all the magic out of Grandpa Makarov." As the man said, "Indeed." As Asta would jump towards him again, raising the Demon Dweller's sword and bringing it down. The man would just chuckle, saying, "Do you really think you can beat me, a magicless loser?" As Asta just started feeling rage, he just laughed. I wanted to pull this out for a special occasion, but I guess this will just have to do." He would raise the Demon Dweller's sword up in the air and say, "All my friends, lend me your strength." As light started shining off of his guild mark and everyone else in the surrounding areas. As the Demon Dweller's sword lit up with light, as the Elemental 4 member just looked at it in shock, as he prepared a blast of his own, saying, "I'm not gonna let you finish that." As Asta just said, "Too late," bringing down the Demon Dweller's sword, releasing the magic in a massive golden blast. It would collide with his opponent's magic, but rip right through it, and blast him directly. The fight was over, and Asta had won. As Asta started teetering on his feet just a little, Urza would show up catching him, telling him that he did a great job, as they just heard clapping as Jose walked into view. Urza and Asta would hear Jose chuckling as he came out of the shadows, as the two of them would rush into battle. Meanwhile, Natsu, who wasn't as beat up as in canon, would appear before Gajiel, somewhat surprised to see that Lucy had been kidnapped, as he immediately felt worried for the couple guild members who were trying to watch over her. Gajiel would actually send Luck and Magnik to go clear out any other intruders, as fire and steel clash. Natsu would be having a hard time until Lucy would
managed to light some pipes full of flammable gas on fire, enabling Natsu to get a power recharge. But this time he would actually recharge much more because he wasn't as beat up. Meanwhile, down below, Josei, Urza, and Asta would begin a 2 versus 1, with Asta cutting through wraiths and Urza trying to attack Josei directly. Gray and Elfman would arrive at the top, but Josei would quickly manage to attack their spirits, knocking them out. Asta would barely manage to resist before Makarov would arrive. Using his light magic, he would say, "Josei, I am going to defeat..." But before he said, a buff man in a t-shirt would walk up and say, "Gramps, I'll handle this. You just go rest." As everyone would be surprised, it was Yami. As Yami would somewhat chuckle. "Michigan said he was gonna give you back your magic. Wasn't expecting you to get here so fast." As Yami would just toss Magna and Luck onto the ground. "Cleared up some rabble on my way here. I'll take care of Josei. After all, the coward clearly didn't want to mess with too many of us." As Urza just smiled and say, "I can't believe you managed to make it here. Where were you?" As Yami scratched behind his head. "Yeah, had to go get Mist again. We had to clear out some rabble before we got here." As he tossed a number of Phantom Lord flags up in the air. Everyone's eyes would go wide as they've just found out that Mistigan and Yami managed to wipe out most of the branch offices of the Phantom Lord. Josei would be enraged, saying, "You did this." And Yami said, "Love to take credit, but Mistigan helped. In fact, he's currently taking care of your wraiths." As we flash outside to Mistigan putting everyone to sleep, so they can't see his face, as he uses his staves to obliterate the shades, as Yami drew his sword, charging it with dark magic. As Makarov decided to step back. After all, he still wasn't at full strength. As Josei versus Yami would begin, with Yami rushing towards him. Josei would summon some of his wraiths and send them at Yami. Yami would counter by quickly cutting them down. He would summon 2 giant ones and release skull-shaped projectiles. Yami would just say, "Dark magic, black hole," as the skulls would go into the black hole. Dark magic, lightless slash, as a wave of darkness would cut through the room, with Josei saying, "Is that all you got?" while putting up a barrier and blocking the slash. Yami would smirk. "I wanted to test this one out," as he raised his sword high, channeled all of his magic into it, have the 2 skeleton giants next to him cast spells, launching more phantom soldiers. As Yami brought down his sword, saying, "Dark magic, dimension slash," as he cut both giants into 2 as they dispelled. Josei would quickly try to cast another one, but before he could, Yami would just shoot towards him, punching him in the face, sending him flying back. As Josei would get up, saying, "No way anyone could handle all my phantom soldiers. They'll slaughter the rest of the members of Fairytail." As a blast would sound out behind him, as Mistigan would walk in. Josei, being shocked fact that all of his wraiths had been defeated, as Mistigan would cast his magic circles, and Yami would launch a dark magic lightless slash. Josei would try to defend, but the attacks would collapse his barrier and knock him out. The day had been won against Phantom Lord. The rest would go pretty close to canon. Mistigan would leave promptly. The rest of the gang would be held for questioning for about a week after the Phantom Lord incident. Yami would also just happen to have skipped town right before the Wizard Council would detain everyone. Afterwards, Lucy would pay her father a visit This interaction would basically be the exact same as in canon, with the rest of the gang meeting up with her. The reactions to how wealthy your family would be about the same, with the only difference being that Asta was part of the group.
And I would like to thank everyone for watching this video, if you got this far, and I added part 13 in here last minute so that it finished the... Can't actually remember what that arc was called. But either way, if you like this content, please like, share, and subscribe. Don't forget to like and comment because that does help the video. And this will be the Spellry signing off. Hope you have a fine day.